What's going on, creators? In this video, we're going to be chatting about the Sigma 18-35mm f1.8 and if it's the best lens to pair with your Panasonic GH5 for achieving cinematic footage. With all the great lens options on the market, I had a tough time making a choice myself on which lens to invest in for my GH5, so I'm hoping this video helps give you some insight to be able to make the best informed decision on your next lens. Real quick, if you're new to this channel, my name is Rickey. I'm an adventure filmmaker. This channel is all about me sharing my journey to becoming a better filmmaker with you, my tips, tricks, tutorials, gear reviews, anything I can to share my knowledge with you. I've been using the Sigma 18-35 and the GH5 combo for 3 years now on a huge range of projects, whether they are for my corporate video production company, paid corporate work, or my travel films. I use this combo like crazy, and the 18-35 lives on my GH5 probably 90% of the time. In the majority of this video, I'm going to be diving into why I've been rocking this combo for so long. Before we dive into the pros and cons, I want to define the word cinematic, and to me, that's basically B-roll, supplemental footage that you're using to tell the story of your video. I know there's going to be people saying that I am misusing the word cinematic in this video, but I think the term has changed a little bit and is used pretty loosely here in 2020. All right, now let's dive into the pros of the 18-35. Number one is that it is a constant aperture zoom lens, an f1.8 zoom lens, meaning you're going to be able to have great low light performance, great depth of field, all while having the ability to zoom in and out from 18mm to 35mm, which on the GH5 crop is actually about 40mm to 65 or something like that on a full frame. In the lens world, having one lens that does all these things is basically unheard of. Most other lenses in the market stop down to only about 2.8, like the Panasonic 12-35, meaning your low light performance and depth of field won't be quite as good as the f1.8 that the Sigma 18-35 offers. Your other option to get an aperture this wide would be to use prime lenses, but then again, you don't have that zoom feature that you get on the 18-35, which is super important for a run and gun style of shooter like myself, where one fixed focal length is not quite gonna cut it. You really do need that 1.8 as opposed to the 2.8 on other lenses on the market to get good bokeh at wide focal lengths on the GH5, because I just feel like the tiny little micro four thirds sensor has a hard time really blurring out the background at f2.8. I feel like you would really benefit from being able to stop all the way down to 1.8. Pro number two is, like I mentioned earlier, the f1.8 really gives the GH5 the low light boost that it truly needs. Being a micro four thirds sensor camera, it really doesn't let in a whole lot of light, so having the widest aperture possible comes in super clutch when you're shooting in low light situations. And if you need to go even lower than f1.8, you can invest in the Metabone speed booster, which is going to take this 1.8 lens all the way down to sometimes f1.2. Real quick, at this point in the video, if you're enjoying what you're watching, make sure to smash that subscribe button, give this video a little thumbs up, and let me know down in the comments if you own the 18-35, what's your favorite thing about it? And if you don't own it, what's the most appealing feature that you've heard me talk about so far? Pro number three, this kind of goes without saying, but the image quality out of this glass is absolutely amazing. It isn't really wide enough to get distorted around the edges or anything, have that vignette or like weird look, and there's little to no chromatic aberration from what I've seen. I'm no colorist or color scientist here, but for those of you who do not know what that is, chromatic aberration, basically when you stop down on cheaper lenses down to like 1.8, 2.0, 2.8, sometimes you can get little purple lines around your subject that just doesn't look very good. I never notice it when it comes to video with this lens. Sometimes if I crop really far on a photo, I'll notice a tiny bit, but this is not a $5,000 to $10,000 lens. So the fourth pro of this lens is it is not a focus by wire mechanical focusing lens. I know that's a mouthful, but basically focusing on this lens is a dream compared to some of the other lenses out there on the market, like the Panasonic 12-35, and that is because when you move this focusing element here, it actually physically moves the glass. Now that may not sound like something crazy, but you can get much more reliable focus this way every single time in every shot, as opposed to the focus by wire focusing systems, usually more native glass, like I said, the 12-35, which basically tells a electronic motor to then focus the camera. So depending on how fast you throw the focus, you're going to get a different focal length on those lenses, as opposed to this guy. it's gonna be reliable every time, which I absolutely love, especially for that running and gunning travel adventure filmmaking that I do. The fifth reason I love the 1835 is because when you zoom in and out, all the elements, everything happens inside the lens. It does not come out and in like most other lenses do. This is important for a few reasons. Number one being when you have it on a gimbal, it's not going to change the balance as much. So whenever you zoom in, you're not going to have to completely rebalance your gimbal. I do believe there is a slight difference, and it will cause your gimbal to shift very slightly, but it's not enough for me to notice. And reason number two why that's important is because it keeps dirt, dust, grit, rain, snow out of the lens. When you have your lens extended out, like I wish I had an example to show you, but you know what I'm talking about. When most lenses, the front extends out, that's an area to collect dust and whatnot that gets sucked back into the lens, and over time, over years, that could destroy your lens. I've beat the heck out of the 1835 over these 3 years I've used it, and it's still working flawlessly. The last reason why I love this lens is because the price point. I picked this lens up on the used market 3 years ago for I think $550. Some of the more expensive Panasonic glass can get into the $1,500, $2,000 range for one lens. To get all the features I mentioned up until now into this $550 lens is absolutely insane. The 1835 lives on my GH5 90% of the time for everything I shoot, like I mentioned earlier. So you're probably thinking the 1835 sounds pretty good right about now. It is, but it does not come without some cons, so let's dive into that now. Con number one is that obviously it's not native glass. This is a Canon mount lens, meaning you'll need an adapter to put it on the GH5. Now that has two reasons why it's a con. Number one, it's gonna cost you a little bit more money to get yourself one of these adapters. There's cheaper and more expensive options. On the cheaper side, the Viltrox, which I don't personally use. I have the regular Metabones, not the Speed Booster. This adapter costs me about $300. It still maintains all the electronic functions of the lens. But this is not the Speed Booster, so it doesn't stop down to f1.2 if I wanted to. The second main reason, on top of the fact that it's gonna cost you a little bit more money, is that the autofocus becomes basically unusable. When you try to autofocus with the 1835 Metabones GH5 combo, the focus just kind of racks and jumps around. It's not smooth like the native glass is. It really just jumps around. It's pretty much, yeah, just unusable. But again, in this video, I'm talking about using this lens to get cinematic B-roll footage. And in that case, I'm using manual focus 100% of the time. I'm not even using the autofocus. So it really doesn't affect me. The second main con for me for the Sigma 1835 1.8 is that it doesn't have quite as much of a zoom range as some of the other lenses on the market. You can't really use it for vlogging because it's not quite wide enough, and you can't really use it as like a telephoto zoom lens because obviously 35mm, that's not a telephoto zoom lens. But for me, I wouldn't be vlogging with this lens anyway because of having to use the adapter. The autofocus doesn't really work, so not a huge deal. If I'm gonna vlog, I throw on my 7 to 14mm wide angle lens. 7mm lens versus 18mm lens is much wider of a perspective for vlogging, and I kind of like that look anyways. Other lenses to check out if you need a similar but wider, or for lack of better words, zoomier lens: the Leica 12 to 60mm f2.8 to f4, the Panasonic 12 to 35 2.8 like I've mentioned before in this video, or the Olympus 12 to 40mm f2.8. Again, none of those lenses stop down to f1.8 like this guy does, and that's really what separates it for me. If you need to punch in a little bit more if you're out shooting, the GH5 does have a 2x optical zoom option. I believe you do lose a bit of quality when you do this, but it's pretty unnoticeable, and I find myself using this feature all the time to punch in just a little bit more on a subject when I need to. Con number three, which isn't super relevant, I kind of just wanted to mention it. Obviously, this lens is not going to be great for pulling focus. Sigma does have a cine version with the gears and everything and a much longer throw, so it's easier to be reliable. The throw on this is pretty short, which takes some getting used to, but it's not the end of the world and it works for me. The fourth con is, well, there's not a fourth con. As you can tell by now, I really enjoy this lens. So, who is the Sigma 1835 lens for? I honestly think that anyone with a GH5 could benefit from having this lens in their kit, even if it was your only lens. The only exception is really if you needed a really wide lens, like maybe for vlogging or for landscapes, or a really punched in telephoto lens to get some compression. Between the very usable focal length and then the f1.8, it just makes this lens an absolute beast for me. If you don't already own a GH5 and you're just doing some research right now, the next thing I think you should do is check out some of my other videos where I compare the GH5 and the A7 III. They're both similar cameras, they're both awesome, and you might want to look into that system as well. If you got value out of this video, you enjoyed it, I would appreciate if you hit that subscribe button so you can see the next one. Give it a little thumbs up. If you have any questions at all, drop them down there in the comments. I'll definitely get back to you. And until next time, I will see you later. Peace.